They called him Ray the Route Guy, never Mr. Carson, never Sir. To them, he was just another old man in a faded transit jacket with creases around the shoulders and a stitch-on name tag curling at the corners. Every morning like clockwork, he sat silently at the corner of the break room, unwrapping a sandwich too neatly packed to have come from anywhere but home, even though no one knew if he still had one. Should have retired 10 years ago, one rookie driver muttered, watching Ray pour black coffee into a chit thermos. But he still thinks the war was Korea. Another driver laughed. He'd probably salute a garbage truck if it had a flag on it. Ray said nothing. He never did. Just tapped the side of his watch twice, adjusted his cap, and walked out to bus 22, the one route no one else wanted because it ran straight through the government complex downtown. The same loop, the same traffic, the same faces. But Ray preferred it. He liked order, structure, and most of all, silence. What no one noticed, not the passengers, not the dispatchers, not even the guy in charge of scheduling, was that Ray always adjusted the rearview mirror an inch lower at stop number 6. That he opened the ramp 3 seconds early at the VA hospital. That he nodded once to the flagpole outside the courthouse, even when no one was watching. No one really saw Ray. Until that day, no one ever did. Before we dive into what changed everything, make sure to like and subscribe if you believe that service doesn't stop with the uniform, and that some of our country's greatest heroes still walk among us, quietly, without asking for anything in return. Because this story, this one isn't about medals. It's about the weight of memory and what happens when respect finally catches up to sacrifice. On the morning it began, the sky was gray in that way that feels permanent, and bus 22 hissed awake like it had lungs full of gravel. Ray adjusted the seat once, set his notebook behind the dash, and double-checked the flag sticker he'd taped up years ago. It was curling now, just like his name tag, but he pressed it flat anyway. The route was quiet, downtown was always quieter on Mondays, and he took each stop with quiet precision. Stop 3. Stop 5. Stop 6, VA hospital. As usual, he lowered the ramp before anyone asked. A man boarded with a cane, another with a walker, and then a young veteran with a prosthetic leg and a backpack too clean to be his. Ray said nothing but nodded once. The young man noticed, but didn't speak. By stop 8, they were packed. Government workers, interns, clerks, 2 officers in dress blues at the back talking about ceremony traffic. Then it happened. At stop 11, Capitol and 4th, a black SUV rolled up slowly. The back door opened, and out stepped Colonel Richard L. Hastings, Medal of Honor recipient. You could hear the shift in air pressure. Every conversation paused. The colonel, now in his 70s but still straight as a flagpole, stepped toward the bus, slow, sure, and focused. As he reached the first step, he looked up at Ray, then snapped to attention and saluted. "Sergeant Major Carson," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "permission to board." The entire bus went still. Ray didn't move at first. Then, like the turn of a forgotten key, he slowly stood and returned the salute. "Permission granted, sir." The colonel nodded and stepped aboard. The passengers stared, unsure if this was a prank or a moment from history crashing into a city bus. The young man pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then looked up, eyes wide. Raymond Carson, Vietnam. 2-time POW escapee. Silver Star. Bronze Star. 5-unit commendations. Presumed Kia. 1976. Found alive in 78. Vanished from public record in 80. The words hit like thunder in the quiet. One of the officers at the back stood up slowly. "Sergeant Major?" Ray didn't reply. Just looked ahead. "I steady. Keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle," he said quietly, gripping the wheel, "and let's make this loop count." No one spoke the rest of the ride. Later, when the bus emptied and Ray parked it back at the terminal, someone noticed the notebook he always tucked behind the dash. They flipped it open. Inside were route logs, but not ordinary ones. Each page was a record of riders, veterans, the elderly, passengers in uniform, kids wearing JROTC pins. Their stop times. When they seemed shaken. When they looked lost. In the back cover, an old letter was folded in 4, dated 1985, signed by a general, thanking Sergeant Major Raymond Carson for continuing to serve this nation in silence. That afternoon, a young reporter would ask him if he was angry no one ever knew who he was. Ray smiled once. "You only salute the flag," he said, "when it's needed most." And with that, he walked off into the drizzle, not into retirement, but into the pages of a story they were just beginning to understand. The silence didn't end when the ride did, it echoed. It followed every passenger off that bus like a question they weren't sure how to ask out loud. By the time bus 22 pulled back into the depot and the brakes hissed to a stop, the story was already spreading like a spark in a drought. Someone had posted a blurry photo of the colonel's salute mid-step, Ray returning it with precise, weathered dignity, and by noon, local reporters were circling the downtown loop trying to find the man behind the wheel. But Ray didn't talk. Not to press. Not to coworkers. Not even when the district supervisor asked him, nervously, if the mayor's office could present him with something at City Hall. He just shook his head once, refilled his thermos, and picked up the night shift. The Medal of Honor recipient, Colonel Hastings, didn't stay quiet, though. He gave a short but fiery interview on national television that same night. That man saved lives, he said. Twice. And not in the headline kind of way, in the dark, messy, no backup kind of way. I owe my life to that man, and you've had him driving a city bus for decades without knowing who he is. The anchor asked him how he felt seeing his old sergeant major again after all these years. Like I stood straighter, he replied. Like a part of me I thought had died, stood back up. Back at the depot, younger drivers started calling Ray sir, under their breath. One of them asked if he really carried a unit through enemy lines. Ray looked at him, not unkindly, and said only, I carried my part. They carried theirs. That was all. But something had changed now. Passengers who used to rush past him now paused. A kid gave him a handmade bracelet with a red, white, and blue bead pattern. An elderly woman left him a note on the dashboard that read, My husband was in Da Nang. He would have saluted you too. But Ray kept the same routine. Thermos. Ramp check. Flag straight. Mirror adjusted at stop 6. Nothing flashy. Until one Thursday evening, a man in a black suit boarded at City Center, holding a clipboard and walking like he'd rehearsed it. He cleared his throat. Sergeant Major Raymond Carson? Ray didn't answer. Just looked at him. The man handed over an envelope, white with a gold seal. On behalf of the Department of Defense, you are formally invited to attend a closed ceremony in your honor. Ray turned the envelope over slowly in his hands, nodded once, and tucked it under the dash beside his logbook. He drove the rest of the shift like nothing had changed. But later that night, sitting on his porch in silence, he opened it. Inside was a single card, and signed but bearing 5 stars and a single sentence. You were never forgotten. You just led from farther back. Ray didn't smile. He just breathed. The next week, with little warning, he took a day off, his first in 22 years. When he returned, the other drivers noticed something strange. His uniform was pressed sharper, his watch polished. A faint scent of metal polish clung to the air. And then, at 4:15 sharp, bus 22 rolled to a smooth stop outside the veterans' shelter. As usual, he lowered the ramp. But this time, a group of men and women in uniform were waiting. Not to board, but to stand. To form a quiet, respectful corridor. At the end of the line stood Colonel Hastings again, this time holding something. A display case. Inside, Ray's medals, restored, sealed behind glass. The same ones Ray had sent back to the military office in 1980 with a single note, let someone else shine. I'm done with noise. Colonel Hastings held it out. They're not for you. They're for us. So we don't forget. Ray looked at the display for a long time, then finally reached forward and gently set it down on the dashboard of bus 22, right beside the curling flag sticker. He turned to the passengers inside, silent, standing now, and simply said, Next stop's ours to keep. The doors closed. And the route rolled on, like it always had. But from that day forward, when people boarded that bus, they didn't see just a driver. They saw a leader who never stopped watching the road ahead, even when everyone else had forgotten who paved it. They never called him, just the bus driver again, not after the salute, not after the medals, and certainly not after the Pentagon letter. Word of who Ray Carson really was had spread quietly at first, like a hush in church, but it moved fast. The mayor's office tried to throw him a parade. The transit authority wanted to name a line after him, and even national news crews camped near his modest house. Cameras pointed at a porch that always remained empty except for one metal chair and a flag gently rustling behind it. But Ray had never served for headlines. He didn't want parades. He wanted the route. And so, every morning, bus 22 still rumbled to life at the same time. Same cap, same jacket, same precise adjustment of the mirror at stop 6. Except now, cadets saluted as he passed the academy. Veterans waiting at the VA stood straighter when the ramp came down. And at every government stop, someone, anyone, would whisper to a stranger, That's him. That's the one Hastings saluted. Ray never reacted. Not outwardly. But he started wearing his watch again without hiding it under his cuff. And once, when a teenage boy with a JROTC patch dropped his backpack while boarding, Ray handed it back and muttered, "Square your corners, son." The boy blinked, then straightened up and nodded like he'd just been inspected by a general. Still, the moment that defined everything didn't happen with a crowd or ceremony. It happened one rainy evening at Stop 11. The bus was nearly empty, just a nurse, a high schooler with earbuds, and a tired father with groceries on his lap. The doors opened. An older woman stepped on slowly, holding a boy by the shoulder. The boy was maybe 12, wearing oversized sneakers and an oversized jacket, his hands buried deep in his pockets. Ray offered the usual nod. But the woman stepped forward. "Is it true?" she asked softly. "Are you Sergeant Major Carson?" Ray didn't answer, but the boy looked up. "My dad talked about you," he said. "He said you carried him out when nobody else would." Ray's hand paused on the gear shift. "Name?" he asked, voice quiet. "Daniel Vargas," the boy replied. "My dad was Corporal Tony Vargas." For the first time in anyone's memory, Ray blinked hard, eyes shimmering for just a moment before he reached under the dash and slid open the compartment. He pulled out his logbook, worn, dog-eared, sacred, and flipped to a page near the back. Without speaking, he turned it toward the boy. A name was circled there. Vargas. Dong Ha. 1969. "He made it back?" Ray asked. The woman nodded. "Because of you. He passed last year. But he told our son about you every birthday. Said he owed everything to the man who walked through hell without raising his voice." The boy sat silently, then offered a small salute, not polished, not practiced, but full of something deeper. Ray nodded once, and the bus rolled forward. That night, after his shift, Ray stayed behind. He wiped the dash, straightened the notebook, adjusted the old flag sticker, and then did something no one had seen in 20 years. He stepped off the bus with his display case in hand and walked it into the terminal office. The next morning, every employee found it in the lobby, a glass box with his medals inside, his unit patch beneath it, and a note etched on brass that read, "I didn't do this to be seen. I drove because I still had ground to cover." This was never about the war. It was about making sure no one else walked home alone. They tried to give him a ceremony, tried again to rename the route. But by the time they got around to it, Ray was gone. No forwarding address. No last ride. Bus 22 was parked one morning without him. On the dash, his notebook. Final page, freshly written, "The route never ends. I'm just walking ahead. Eyes forward. Corners squared." They never found him. Some said he moved out west. Others swore they saw him handing out food at a veteran's shelter in Ohio. One man said he spotted him riding passenger in a military convoy heading toward Arlington, but no one ever confirmed it. What they did do was change the terminal name without asking, the Carson Post. Every new hire reads the story now on day one. And the final stop on Route 22 is no longer just called City Hall. It's the Salute. Because some riders forget where they're going. But every driver who sits in Ray Carson's seat remembers exactly where we've been.